My mom grabbed the microphone at my own wedding and told 200 people I was a liar. She stood up in her lavender dress, tapped the mic twice, and her voice filled the whole hall. "My daughter scammed this man into marrying her," she said. "Everything she told him was a lie." The room stopped breathing. I watched the toasts freeze in people's hands. My sister Denise didn't gasp like the others. She lifted her phone higher and kept recording, thumb steady, like she'd been waiting all day. And my husband, Sam, didn't flinch either. He set down his fork, reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, and rested his hand there, calm as a Sunday. What my mom didn't know was simple. The one person in that hall holding 9 years of records was standing 3 steps from her chair. She thought she was ending me in front of everyone. She was about to find out which one of us kept the receipts. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where ordinary women finally set the record straight, quietly, and for good. If stories about family, loyalty, and the exact moment the truth walks into the room are your kind of thing, you're in the right place. Stay with me because this one turns. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Let me back up. My name is Grace, and for 12 years I've worked labor and delivery at the county hospital in our little corner of Ohio. Night shifts mostly. I've caught babies at 3 in the morning and held hands through the kind of news no one wants. It's work that teaches you to stay level when everyone else comes apart. You learn to keep your voice quiet so the room stays calm. That habit followed me home. In our family, I was the level one, the one who answered the phone at midnight, the one who drove over when the furnace died. My dad passed when I was 12, and after that, somebody had to be steady. I decided it would be me. I was 34 now, and I'd spent most of those years being the person everyone could count on. I paid my own way through nursing school. I never asked anyone for a thing. I balanced my checkbook to the penny and slept fine at night. People trusted me with their worst moments, and I never let them down. What I didn't understand yet was that being trustworthy has a price, and my family had been quietly charging it to my account for years. When you're the reliable one, nobody thinks to protect you. They assume you'll protect yourself, and you assume you don't need protecting. That was my blind spot. Not weakness. Just a habit of carrying things because I could. I signed papers when they asked. I covered gaps when they appeared. I told myself it was what a good daughter did. I didn't know how much I'd been carrying until someone finally added it up. That someone was about to become my husband. I met Sam at a coworker's cookout 2 years before that wedding. He was the quiet man by the grill who asked good questions and actually listened to the answers. He's an accountant, a CPA, which means he spends his days finding the true story hidden in a column of numbers. On our 3rd date, he told me numbers never lie, but people who write them down sometimes do. I laughed then. I didn't know how much that sentence would matter. Sam wasn't flashy. He fixed my brakes without being asked. He remembered how I took my coffee. He was kind in the small, steady ways that add up over time. When he proposed, he did it on my back porch with no audience, because he knew I hated a scene. A few months before the wedding, he suggested we start combining our finances. Nothing dramatic. Just a shared plan, the way couples do. He wanted us walking into marriage with our eyes open. I hesitated. Not because I doubted him, because my family's money situation was a knot I'd stopped trying to untangle. "It's complicated," I told him. "There's an old account my mom's name is on. Some loans that float around. It's just how we've always done things." He nodded slowly, the way he does when a number doesn't add up. "Complicated is fine," he said. "I like complicated. It usually means someone's been hoping nobody looks too closely." I told myself he was talking about clients. I told myself my family was different. I was about to learn that hope was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because when Sam finally did look closely, the picture that came into focus was one I'd been avoiding my whole adult life. "You should meet my family before the wedding, because you'll want to know who was in that hall." My mom, Rhonda, was 61 and widowed young. She raised us on grit and a hairdresser's income and never let us forget the sacrifice. My older sister Denise was 38, 4 years ahead of me, and had spent a decade chasing a salon business that kept sinking. Her latest was called Sheer Envy. My Uncle Wade, my mom's younger brother, was 57 and the kind of man who co-signs things and then panics. That was the cast. A few weeks before the wedding, we had a family dinner at Mom's place, 15 minutes from my apartment. Denise spent most of it complaining about her rent and her landlord and her suppliers. Mom kept steering the conversation back to me, but not in a warm way. "Grace has always been our rock," she told Sam, patting my hand across the table. "You always were the reliable one, Gracie." She said it like a compliment. I'd heard it my whole life and always taken it as one, but something about the way she said it that night, with Denise nodding along and Wade avoiding my eyes, made it land differently. It didn't feel like praise. It felt like a leash. Like they were reminding me of my job. Sam caught it too. On the drive home, he said, "Interesting, how they only call you reliable right before they need something." I told him he was reading too much into it. That's the thing about a leash you've worn your whole life. You forget it's there until someone else points at your neck. I forgot about it by morning. I shouldn't have. The knot started coming loose on a Sunday afternoon at my kitchen table. Sam had spreadsheets open and that patient look on his face. We were listing accounts, both of us, laying it all out. I mentioned the old savings account, the one my mom and I both had our names on. I'd opened it at 18. Mom co-signed it back then to help me build credit, she'd said, and it had just always been there. I'd been putting money into it for years, a little from every paycheck. My rainy day fund, my someday fund. Sam pulled up the balance online while I made coffee. When I came back, he was very still. "Grace," he said, "how much do you think is in here?" I guessed. I'd been socking money away since my 20s. I figured a solid cushion, maybe 30 or 40,000 by now. He turned the laptop toward me. The number on the screen was under $4,000. I stood there holding 2 mugs and felt the floor tilt. "That's not right," I said. "That has to be a mistake." Sam didn't say anything for a moment. He was scrolling, and his jaw had gone tight. "It's not a mistake," he said finally. "The money went somewhere, regularly, for years." I set the mugs down before I dropped them. My rainy day fund, the thing I'd built one careful deposit at a time, had been draining out the back the whole time I'd been filling it up front. Where did it all go? I already knew the answer sat somewhere in my own family. I just wasn't ready to say the name out loud. Here's what I need you to understand, because I asked myself the same question you're asking now. How did a woman who counts everything miss this? The truth is, I didn't fully miss it. 2 years earlier, I'd noticed the balance looked lighter than it should. I'd called my mom about it. "Oh, honey, I moved some things around," she'd said. "Don't you worry about that account. I keep an eye on it." I remember standing in the hospital break room, tired off a double shift, deciding to trust her. She was my mother. She was on the account for a reason. I told myself I'd sit down and go through it properly on my next day off. Then a patient coded, and a shift became a week, and the week became a season. Once, I'd even called the bank to ask about closing it and just keeping my own account. The man on the phone told me it wasn't that simple. Both names were on it. Both owners had rights. Closing it would take paperwork and cooperation from both of us. I'd meant to push. Life kept pushing back harder. So no, I wasn't a fool who never looked. I was a busy woman who looked, got a soothing answer from someone she loved, and set the worry down because she had 10 other worries stacked on top of it. That's how they get you. Not with one big lie, with a small, warm reassurance, repeated, from a voice you've trusted your whole life. But that Sunday at my kitchen table, with the real number glowing on Sam's laptop, the soothing answer stopped working. I picked up my phone and requested every statement the bank had on file. All of them, however many years it took. While I waited for those statements, the wedding kept coming toward us like weather. We'd picked a small church in town and the old Grange Hall for the reception, the one with the string lights and the wood floor that everybody's cousin got married on. 200 guests, give or take. Half the county, it felt like. My mom had thrown herself into helping, which should have warmed me and instead made me uneasy. Rhonda didn't usually volunteer, but she'd insisted on managing the guest list, the seating, the order of the toasts. "Let me do this for you, Gracie," she said. "You've done so much for everyone. Let your mother handle it." A month before, that would have felt like love. Now, every offer came with a shadow behind it. She wanted control of the room. I could see that clearly now, even if I couldn't yet say why. She fussed over who sat where. She wanted to know exactly when speeches would happen and who would hold the mic. She asked twice whether Sam's family had questions about our side. At the time, I thought she was just being an anxious mother of the bride. Looking back, she was a woman preparing a stage. She'd learned I'd requested the statements. She knew the numbers were coming. And somewhere in her mind, a plan was forming to get out ahead of them. If the truth was going to come out, she decided, it would come out on her terms, in her words, in front of everyone I knew. She just needed the microphone, and she'd made very sure she'd be the one holding it. I couldn't wait for the paperwork to sit still. 2 weeks before the wedding, I drove the 15 minutes to my mom's house to ask her directly. I sat at the same kitchen table where she'd braided my hair as a girl. I kept my voice calm, the way I do with a scared patient. "Mom," I said, "the savings account is almost empty. I've been putting money in for years. I need to understand where it went." She didn't look surprised. That was the first thing that told me everything. A woman surprised by a question looks up. My mother looked down at her coffee. "Some of it went to help Denise," she said. "The salon. You know how she struggles." "Some of it?" I repeated. "How much?" She waved her hand like she was shooing a fly. "Does it matter? Between family? We help each other. That's what your father would have wanted." Then she said the sentence I'll hear for the rest of my life. She looked me dead in the eye, chin up, and said, "We're family. That money was always ours." Ours. Not mine that I chose to share. Ours. As if my name on those deposit slips was a formality. As if 12 years of night shifts had been feeding a family pot I never agreed to fill. I didn't yell. I sat very still and felt something old and load-bearing quietly crack. "It wasn't ours, Mom," I said. "It was mine. I just let you think otherwise." She smiled at me then, almost gently, and I understood that she truly did not see the difference. In her mind, I existed to be drawn from. I drove home in silence and started making a different kind of plan. The obvious move was to close the account. I tried. The next morning, I went to the branch in person, driver's license in hand, ready to shut the whole thing down. I sat across from a young banker named Priya and told her I wanted to close a joint savings account, effective immediately. She pulled it up, then gave me the careful smile of someone about to deliver bad news. "This is a joint account with rights of survivorship," she said. "Both owners have full access. Under this bank's policy for this type of account, to close it cleanly we need both parties to agree, or at least to be notified. One owner can't just erase the other." "She's my mother," I said. "She's been draining it." "I understand," Priya said, and she looked like she meant it. "But on an account set up the way yours was, her name gives her the same standing as yours here. You can withdraw your own funds today. You can't lock her out overnight. And if she contests the closure, our process to force it through over her objection could take weeks." Weeks. The wedding was in 13 days. I could pull out what little was left, and I did, moving it somewhere my mom couldn't touch. But the account itself, the shared thing with both our names, couldn't just vanish before the wedding unless Rhonda cooperated. And Rhonda, I now understood, would never cooperate, because the open account was the last thing tying my money to her reach. So I did the one thing I could still do cleanly. I made sure every statement, every transfer, every date and dollar was documented and in my hands. If I couldn't close the door in time, I'd at least be able to show everyone exactly who'd been walking through it. The statements arrived in a fat envelope on a Thursday. Sam and I spread them across the kitchen table under the good lamp, and we went through them line by line, the way he goes through a client's books. It took most of the night. What emerged wasn't chaos. It was a pattern. And patterns are worse, because patterns mean somebody meant it. Every few weeks, for years, money left my account. Small enough not to scream, regular enough to add up. Some went out as transfers to an account we could trace to Denise. Some went out as cash. The withdrawals clustered around the dates I knew Denise's salon had struggled, and around the 2 times she'd reopened it under a new name. I sat back and looked at years of my careful saving laid out as somebody else's spending. "This isn't an accident," Sam said quietly. "Accidents are random. This is a schedule." He was right. Nobody drains an account by accident on a schedule. This was a habit somebody had built and maintained, deposit by deposit, on the assumption that the reliable one would never sit down and count. I felt a lot of things that night. Anger, yes. But underneath it, something colder and clearer. For years I'd been told this was love, was family, was what Dad would have wanted. The numbers told a different story, and numbers, as Sam liked to say, don't lie. The people who write them down sometimes do. I looked at the total forming at the bottom of Sam's legal pad and knew my whole understanding of my family was about to be rewritten in my own handwriting. I needed to see Denise's side with my own eyes, so I drove to the next town over, where sheer envy sat in a tired strip mall between a nail place and a vacant unit. The lights were half off. A handwritten sign in the window advertised a discount that smelled like desperation. My sister was inside, sweeping hair off a floor that hadn't seen many customers. She looked up and, for a second, seemed almost glad to see me. Then she read my face. "Don't," she said. "Whatever Mom told you, don't." "She didn't tell me anything," I said. "The bank did." Denise leaned on her broom. She didn't deny it. Instead, she got defensive in the way people do when the thing they're defending is indefensible. "I was going to pay it back," she said. "Every dime. You know how hard I've worked. You've always had it easier, Grace. Steady job, no risk. I'm out here trying to build something." "With my money," I said. "That you never asked me for?" "Mom said you'd help." She said it fast, almost by reflex. "She said you always do. She handled it so I wouldn't have to bother you." There it was. My mother, brokering my money to my sister behind my back, and calling it sparing me the trouble. Denise's chin was trembling now, half anger, half fear. "If you make this a thing at the wedding, you'll tear this family apart," she said. "Is that what you want?" I looked at her, and at the empty chairs, and at the sign in the window. "I'm not the one who tore anything," I said. "I'm just the one who finally read the receipts." I left before she could film my face for whatever story she was already building. That evening, my Uncle Wade called. Wade never called me. We were the kind of family that only dialed each other for funerals and favors. "Gracie," he said, too friendly, "your mother tells me you're stirring up some old money business. I just want to make sure we don't blow a little misunderstanding into something ugly right before your big day." "It's not a misunderstanding, Wade," I said. "There are statements." A pause. In that pause, I heard something shift. "Well," he said, quieter now, "you don't want to drag everybody into a bank matter. Some of us have our names on things too, and none of it means what it looks like." I sat up straighter. "What things, Wade?" He backpedaled fast, but not fast enough. Bit by bit, over the next few minutes, the shape of it came clear. Wade had co-signed on one of Denise's business loans years back, when the salon reopened the second time. If Denise defaulted, Wade was on the hook. If my money stopped quietly covering Denise's gaps, Denise might default. Which meant Wade needed my money to keep flowing just as badly as my mother did. Suddenly, the whole thing wasn't a mother and a struggling sister. It was a small machine, and I'd been the fuel, and every person tied to it had a reason to keep me quiet and keep me paying. "So that's why everyone's so eager to smooth this over," I said. "It's not about my wedding. It's about your exposure." Wade didn't answer. He didn't have to. He mumbled something about family and hung up. I set the phone down and understood, for the first time, just how many people were counting on me never counting. I asked Sam to do what he does best. Not to fight anyone. Just to add it up, cleanly, so I could see the whole truth in one place. He worked at it for 2 evenings, cross-checking the statements against dates, sorting the transfers, separating what went to Denise from what went out as cash. He didn't editorialize. He just built a ledger, the way he'd build one for any client, and let the columns speak. When he finished, he set the printed page in front of me without a word. Over 9 years, more than $60,000 had left my account. Of that, $22,000 traced directly to Denise and the salon. The rest had gone to cash withdrawals in my mother's usual amounts, on my mother's usual days. $60,000. I made a good living, but I made it one 12-hour shift at a time. I did the quick math of what $60,000 meant in night shifts, in skipped vacations. In the house down payment I kept telling myself I'd save for someday. Someday had been getting spent by other people the whole time. I didn't cry over that page. I'd done my crying 2 Sundays ago at the kitchen table. What I felt instead was a strange, steadying calm. The fog was gone. There was no more wondering, no more soothing voice on the phone. There was a number, and the number was true, and it was mine to do something about. Sam saved the ledger to his phone and printed a second copy for the folder. "Just in case," he said. "You never know when you'll want the receipts handy." Neither of us knew yet how right he was. You'd think that with the numbers in hand, my mother would have retreated. She did the opposite. 10 days before the wedding, she showed up at my apartment with a folder of her own and a pen. "I've been thinking," she said, settling onto my couch like she owned it. "Denise needs a little bridge loan to get the salon through the season. I've drawn up a simple gift letter. You sign, it makes everything clean, and we don't have to have any awkwardness at the wedding." She slid the paper across my coffee table. A gift letter. Signing away, on paper, the very money that had been taken without my permission, so that the taking would become legal and I could never claim it back. She wanted me to bless it, to make the theft a gift with my own signature, days before I stood up in front of everyone I loved. "No," I said. Just that. Calm. Final. Her face changed. The warmth drained out of it, and what was underneath was something I'd never let myself see before. "Grace," she said, low, "you don't want to make an enemy of your own mother the week of your wedding." "I'm not making anything," I said. "I'm just not signing." She stood, gathered her folder, and paused at my door. "You think about how this looks," she said. 200 people are coming to celebrate you. It would be a shame if they learned what kind of daughter turns on her family over money." I heard the threat clearly. I just didn't yet know she meant to carry it out with a microphone. She let herself out. I stood in my quiet apartment and understood the wedding had become a battlefield, and she'd just told me where she'd plant her flag. That night I couldn't sleep, so I did what I always do when the world tilts. I cleaned. I pulled the closet apart, sorting things for the move into Sam's place, and that's when I found my father's old shoebox on the top shelf, behind the winter blankets. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were the ordinary relics of a good man gone too soon: his reading glasses, a church program, a few photographs, and beneath them, folded in quarters, a bank statement so old the paper had gone soft at the creases. It was the very first statement from that savings account, from the year I turned 18. My father had kept it, and paper-clipped to it, in his careful block handwriting, was a note. I sat on the floor of my half-packed closet and read it under the closet light. It said the account was Grace's college money. It said Rhonda had co-signed only to help Grace build credit, and for no other reason. It was dated and signed, in my father's hand. In my father's handwriting, plain as day, was the truth I'd let everyone talk me out of. This account was mine. I'd forgotten I ever owned those words. My mother had spent years telling me that money was ours, that family shared, that Dad would have wanted it. And here was Dad himself, reaching across 22 years, telling me exactly what he'd wanted. He'd wanted it to be mine. He'd written it down because some part of him must have known. I held that soft old paper for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. I had the statements. I had the ledger, and now I had my father's own words backing every one of them. Whatever my mother planned to say into that microphone, I finally knew which of us was telling the truth. And I had it in writing. I showed Sam the note the next morning. He read it twice, set it down gently, and looked at me. "This is your father telling the truth about your own money," he said. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, but if it comes to it, you can." We talked for a long time about what to do. The easy thing would have been to blow it up first, to call my mother, to threaten, to demand it back before the wedding and dare her to show her face. But I've spent my life learning that the loudest person in the room is almost never the one who's right. My mother's whole power was volume. Her weapon was the story she could tell, the scene she could make, the way she could turn a room with a trembling voice. I couldn't outshout her, and I didn't want to. So we made a different kind of decision. We wouldn't start anything. We'd let the day be the day. But if she reached for the microphone, if she tried to make her story the official one in front of everyone I loved, we'd be ready. Not with louder words, with quieter facts. "She'll bring noise," Sam said. "We'll bring the numbers." I nodded. It felt right in a way that yelling never would. Let her be loud. Loud fades. A number on a page just sits there, being true. I went to bed that night strangely at peace. The account still wasn't closed, the paperwork still grinding along behind the scenes. But I wasn't afraid of the wedding anymore. I'd stopped hoping my mother would do the right thing. I'd started preparing for her to do the wrong one. There's a kind of calm that comes from that. I slept better than I had in weeks. My mother, it turned out, had her own sleepless nights. I learned later, from an aunt who couldn't keep a secret, that Wade had told Rhonda I'd pulled all the statements, that I had a folder, that the reliable one had finally sat down and counted. It rattled her. A few days before the wedding she called me, and for once she didn't lead with a demand. Her voice was thin. "You know I never had anything handed to me," she said. "Your father died and left me with 2 girls and a chair in a salon that wasn't even mine. I was 39, and terrified. I promised myself I'd never be poor and helpless again. Never." For a moment I felt it. The real fear under all of it. A young widow doing math at a kitchen table, deciding survival justified anything. I understood her, truly, for the length of one breath. Then she kept talking. "So you'll understand," she said, her voice hardening again, "why I did what I had to. And why you're going to let it go. Family protects family, Grace. You of all people know that." And the sympathy closed like a door. Because there's a difference between a scared young widow and a woman of 61 asking her daughter to sign away $60,000 and smile about it. Fear explains where she started. It doesn't excuse where she'd chosen to stay. She wasn't drowning anymore. She'd learned to breathe underwater by holding my head down. "I understand you were scared, Mom," I said. "I don't understand why I'm still paying for it." She hung up. I stood there knowing that the fear I'd just heard was about to turn into something else. Cornered people don't get quiet. They get loud. 2 days before the wedding, I stopped by Mom's to drop off the last of the seating cards, and I heard them before I saw them. The kitchen window was open. Rhonda and Denise were at the table, talking low, and my name kept surfacing. I stood on the back step, half ashamed to listen and unable to stop. "If she says anything at all, you have to get ahead of it," my mother was saying. "We tell it first. We tell it our way." A woman who'd shame her own mother over money right before her wedding. "People will side with the mother, Denise. They always do." "And I'll have it on video," Denise said. "So there's proof of how she acted." "Exactly. You film. I'll speak. We control the story." I stood very still on that step. They weren't planning to defend themselves if I brought it up. They were planning to strike first, to paint me as the villain in front of 200 witnesses before I could say a word, and to record my reaction so the story would live online forever. My own mother and sister, choreographing my public humiliation like a wedding toast. I could have walked in. I could have screamed. Instead, I set the seating cards on the step where they'd find them, and I drove home, hands steady on the wheel, more certain than ever. They'd just told me the plan. Rhonda would grab the mic, Denise would film. They'd move first. Which meant I didn't have to guess anymore. I only had to be ready for the exact moment it came. And thanks to my mother's need to rehearse, I knew precisely where the knife was coming from. The night before the wedding, my mother came by with a tin of the lemon bars she'd made for every important day of my life. It was such a normal gesture that for a second I forgot everything. She sat on my couch and looked around at the boxes, the dress hanging on the closet door, the whole small evidence of a life about to change. "My baby, getting married," she said softly, and her eyes were wet, and I honestly couldn't tell how much was real. Then she reached over, squeezed my hand, and said it again. "You always were the reliable one, Gracie." This time I heard every layer in it. It wasn't a compliment. It never had been. It was an instruction, a gentle, lifelong reminder of my assigned role. Be the one who absorbs. Be the one who doesn't make a scene. Be the one we can count on to keep quiet and keep paying. 34 years I'd worn that word like a medal. That night, on the couch, I finally felt it for what it was, a collar. I looked at her and I didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue. "I know, Mom," I said. "I've been reliable my whole life." She smiled, satisfied, hearing agreement where I meant something else entirely. She left the lemon bars and kissed my forehead and drove off into the dark, certain she had me managed. I stood at the window and watched her taillights shrink. Tomorrow, she would reach for a microphone in a room full of the people I loved. She thought reliable meant I'd take it. She was about to learn what reliable really meant. It meant that when I finally decided to tell the truth, every single number would be exactly where I said it was. The morning of the wedding was blue and clear, one of those Ohio spring days that makes you forgive the whole, long winter. I got ready in the little room off the church with 2 nurse friends who'd known me for years. My hands were steady. People kept asking if I was nervous, and I wasn't. Not the way they meant. I was calm the way I am before a hard delivery, when I know the room might get complicated and I've already decided to be the steady one. Sam found me for a minute before the ceremony, in the hallway, away from everyone. He looked handsome and serious in his gray suit. He didn't ask if I'd changed my mind about staying quiet. He just patted the inside pocket of his jacket. "It's here," he said. "The ledger, the statements, all of it. I hope we don't need it." "Me too," I said, and meant it. I didn't want a scene at my own wedding. Nobody sane does. But wanting peace and expecting it are 2 different things, and I'd stopped expecting it the moment I heard my mother rehearsing through her kitchen window. "If she reaches for that microphone," Sam said quietly, "you don't have to do anything. Just look at me. I'll handle it." I squeezed his hand. Out in the sanctuary, I could hear the guests settling into the pews, 200 voices murmuring, the organ warming up. Somewhere in the front row, my mother was sitting in her lavender dress with a plan folded up inside her like a second heartbeat. I took a breath, the deep kind I take before I walk into a room that needs me steady. Then I picked up my flowers. Whatever was coming, it was coming today. The ceremony itself was beautiful, and I want to hold on to that. Because it was real, and it was mine. Pastor Dale, who'd known me since I was a girl in the second pew, married us under the tall church windows with the spring light coming through. Sam's voice shook a little on his vows, which undid me in the best way. I got through mine without crying, mostly. When Pastor Dale pronounced us married, the whole church stood and clapped, and for a few golden minutes I forgot every folder and ledger and lemon bar. I was just a woman who'd married a good man. My mother sat in the front row and dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. To anyone watching, she was the picture of a proud mother of the bride. I caught her eye once during the ceremony and she smiled at me, warm and wet-eyed, and a foolish part of me hoped. Maybe she wouldn't do it. Maybe standing in that holy light, watching her daughter marry, she'd feel something soften. Maybe the plan I'd overheard would stay folded up and unspoken, and we'd all just go dance and eat cake and let it lie. I let myself hope that, walking back down the aisle on Sam's arm into the applause and the sunlight. It's the last time that day I let hope do my thinking for me. Because the ceremony was the church. The reception was the Grange Hall. And a microphone doesn't belong to a sanctuary. It belongs to a stage. My mother had made very sure she'd be the one holding it when we got there. The beautiful part was over. The true part was about to begin. The Grange Hall glowed. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, and the long tables were dressed in white, and 200 people I'd known my whole life packed in under the rafters with plates of chicken and warm rolls. For an hour it was perfect. There was laughter and toasts from Sam's brother and my maid of honor, and the good clatter of a country reception in full swing. But I was reading the room the way I read a monitor. I saw the small signs. Wait at his table. Not eating. Glancing again and again toward my mother. Aunt Carol beside him, twisting her napkin. Denise near the front, her phone already out, held low, screen up, thumb resting on it. And my mother, at the head table, sitting very upright, waiting with the patience of someone who has decided exactly when she'll move. When the dinner plates were clearing, she rose. She smoothed her lavender dress, and she walked to the little riser where the microphone stood on its stand, and she picked it up. A few people clapped, expecting a sweet mother of the bride speech. I felt Sam go still beside me. Under the table, his hand moved to the inside of his jacket, just resting there, not yet pulling anything out. My mother tapped the mic. The speakers popped. The room turned toward her, warm and expectant, 200 faces ready to be moved. I set down my fork. I looked at Sam. He looked back at me and gave the smallest nod. Here it comes, that nod said. Whatever you need. Across the room, Denise raised her phone until the little glowing rectangle pointed straight at me, and my mother opened her mouth. Thank you all for coming, my mother began, and her voice was honey. It means the world to see my Grace so happy, surrounded by everyone who loves her. A warm murmur moved through the hall. She let it settle. She was good at this. I'll give her that. She knew how to hold a room. You know, she went on, dabbing her eye, a mother spends her whole life protecting her children, and sometimes protecting them means telling a hard truth, even on a happy day. Even when it costs her. The murmur changed. A few people glanced at each other. This wasn't the shape of a normal toast, and everybody could feel it bending. I sat perfectly still. I'd heard the rehearsal through a kitchen window. I knew every turn this speech was about to take before she took it. I love my daughter, she said, and now there was a tremble in it, the practiced tremble of a woman about to play victim and heroine at once. Which is why I can't stand here and let this go on without everyone knowing who she really is, what she's really done. The room went quiet in that specific way a room goes quiet when it senses a wound about to open. 200 people leaned in. Denise's phone tracked me from across the hall, steady as a surgeon's light. Sam's hand stayed inside his jacket, calm, waiting. And I sat there, a brand new wife in a white dress, and did the hardest thing I know how to do. I stayed level. I let her walk all the way out onto the branch, because I already knew it wouldn't hold her, and I wanted every single person in that room to be watching when it broke. She said it fast, the way you rip a bandage. My daughter scammed this man into marrying her, my mother announced, sweeping her arm toward Sam. Everything she told him was a lie. She let him think she's this responsible, honest woman. The truth is, she's been hiding money, turning her own family against each other, and lying to every one of you. The hall went so silent I could hear the string lights hum. 200 people stopped breathing at once. I felt the weight of every eye land on me, the bride in white, publicly branded a liar by her own mother on her wedding day. Somewhere a fork clinked against a plate and it sounded like a gunshot. I saw Sam's family exchange looks. I saw old neighbors' faces fall. And I understood exactly what she was doing. She was getting ahead of the numbers. She'd learned I had the statements, so she was recasting the whole story before I could tell it, making herself the brave truth-teller and me the exposed fraud. If she called me a liar loudly enough first, then anything I said afterward would sound like a guilty woman defending herself. It was clever. It was cruel. And she wasn't finished. "I've carried this family my whole life," she said, her voice rising, working the room. "I gave everything for these girls. So yes, when times were hard, family helped family, and now she wants to punish us for it." Then she landed on the line she'd clearly been building toward, the one she needed everyone to swallow. She lifted her chin, looked out at all my friends and neighbors, and said it like scripture. "We're family. That money was always ours. Ours." There it was again, that word, weaponized now in front of everyone I loved. Denise's phone drank it all in, and I finally reached over, laid my hand on Sam's, and stood up. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I stood up slowly in my white dress, and 200 faces swung from my mother to me. I could feel what they expected. A sob, a denial, a daughter falling apart. That's the story my mother had set up, and a broken bride would have completed it perfectly. I gave them something else. I smoothed my dress the same way she'd smoothed hers, and I walked, unhurried, to the little riser where she stood clutching the microphone. Up close, I could see the triumph in her eyes, and underneath it, a flicker of doubt, because I wasn't behaving the way the reliable one was supposed to behave. "May I?" I said quietly, and held out my hand for the mic. She hesitated. To refuse would look wrong in front of everyone, so she gave it to me, and the moment my fingers closed around it, I felt the room shift its weight, ever so slightly, back toward me. I turned to face my guests, my friends, my neighbors, my brand new husband, watching me with a steadiness that matched my own. I let the silence hold for a breath. I've learned in 12 years of hard rooms that calm is louder than screaming, if you can hold it. "Thank you, Mom," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "You're right about one thing. Somebody in this room has been lying for a very long time." A ripple went through the hall. 200 people who'd braced for a meltdown got a level voice instead, and level was so much more unsettling. My mother's smile thinned. "And since we're being honest at my wedding," I said, "let's be honest all the way." I looked at Sam. He rose to his feet. "Most of you have known me my whole life," I said into the mic, and I kept my voice easy, almost gentle, like I was talking one scared patient down instead of 200 people. "You've called me the reliable one, the steady one, the daughter who never makes a fuss. That's true. I don't make a fuss. So I want you to understand that I wouldn't say what I'm about to say unless every word of it could be proven." I paused. Nobody moved. Even Denise's phone had drifted lower, forgotten for a second in her hand. "My mother just told you I've been hiding money and lying to my husband," I said. "Here's what actually happened. For 9 years, money has been quietly leaving a savings account with my name on it. Money I earned, one night shift at a time. I didn't hide it. I didn't even know the full size of it until a few weeks ago, when I finally sat down and pulled every statement the bank had." A murmur started, low and uncertain. I could see people doing the math on their faces, remembering that I was a nurse, not a schemer. "My mother is right that this is about family," I said. "She's just wrong about who lied, so I'm not going to stand here and argue with her. Arguing is just two people's word against each other. Instead, I'm going to show you." I turned to Sam. He'd come to stand at the edge of the riser, phone already in his hand, calm as a man reading a weather report. "This is my husband, Sam," I said. "He's an accountant, and at my request, he put every one of those numbers in one place." I nodded to him. "Show them." Sam stepped up beside me and turned to face the room, and I watched 200 people recalibrate. This wasn't a hysterical bride anymore. This was a quiet man in a gray suit holding a phone, and quiet men holding phones make people nervous in a way that shouting never does. "Good evening," Sam said, and his voice carried without him ever raising it. "I do this for a living. I find the true story inside people's finances, so I'm not going to give you my opinion tonight. I'm going to give you the record." He held up the phone so the front tables could see. Then he reached into the folder under his arm and set a small stack of printed pages on the nearest table. I printed copies of the bank's own statements, he said. Don't take my word for anything. Pass these around, read them yourselves. The pages moved hand to hand through the front tables. I watched neighbors bend over the columns, tracing the dates with their fingers, and I saw the exact moment each face changed from doubt to certainty. He handed one full set to Pastor Dale, who put on his glasses, read it slowly, and gave a single grave nod to the room, the way a man does when he's checked a thing himself. Only then did Sam speak again, plainly, the way he does. A few weeks ago, Grace asked the bank for the complete history of a joint savings account. Not me. Grace. It's her account. Her name has been on it since she was 18. Her mother's name was added, at the time, for one reason, to help a teenager build credit. He let that sit. I want to be clear about something, Sam went on, because Rhonda called Grace a liar in front of all of you. Grace didn't come here to do this. She hoped she'd never have to. She only pulled these records to protect herself because someone had been draining that account for years, and when she asked about it, she was told it was none of her business. Across the room, my mother had gone very still. The triumph was gone from her face. She could feel where this was going, and there was no microphone in her hand to stop it now. Sam turned the phone so more of the room could see the neat columns glowing there. Every transfer, every date, every dollar. He looked up, found my mother's eyes across 200 silent guests, and said the words I will remember for the rest of my life. Rhonda, he said gently, you wanted to talk about honesty? All right. Now let's talk about your family. He read it out plainly, no drama, which somehow made it land harder. Over the past 9 years, Sam said, more than $60,000 left Grace's savings account. Not all at once, a little at a time, regularly, on a schedule. A sound moved through the hall, a collective intake of breath. $60,000 is a number people in that room understood in their bones. It was a truck. It was a down payment. It was years of somebody's life. Of that, Sam continued, $22,000 went directly to a salon business. You may know it. Sheer envy. Every head in the room turned toward Denise. Her phone was still up, still recording, but her hand had started to shake so that the little glowing rectangle trembled. She looked like she wanted the floor to open. The rest, Sam said, left as cash withdrawals. Regular amounts, on regular days, from an account Grace was told to stop worrying about. He lowered the phone. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not here to accuse anyone of a crime. I'm just telling you what the bank's own records say. Grace earned this money caring for your children when they were born and your parents when they were dying. And for 9 years, while everyone called her the reliable one, it was being spent by other people who were counting on her never to count. The silence in that hall was total. 200 people were looking at my mother and at my sister and at my Uncle Wade, whose face had gone the gray of old snow. Nobody was looking at me like a liar anymore. Half of them had the printed statements in their own hands, reading the same numbers Sam had just spoken. They were looking at the three of them. And in that moment, I understood the strange power of simply being right and being quiet about it. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't cried. I'd let a good man read a column of numbers, and the numbers had done what no shouting ever could. They'd turned the whole room around. My mother stood alone by the head table. No microphone. No crowd. Nothing left to hold. And then she came apart. You don't get to do this to me. My mother's voice cracked across the hall. Raw now. None of the honey left. After everything I gave up for you too, I buried your father. I raised you alone. I did what I had to do to survive. And this is how you thank me? On your wedding day? In front of everyone? She was shaking, her face blotched red, the practiced tremble replaced by something real and ugly and cornered. And here is the part I want you to understand, because it's the whole point. I didn't rise to meet her. I didn't match her volume. The angrier she got, the quieter I became. I've learned that in delivery rooms too. When someone's panicking, you don't panic back. You get calm, and your calm becomes the loudest thing in the room. "Nobody's doing anything to you, Mom," I said, and my voice was almost soft. "Sam just read what happened, that's all." "That money was always ours," she screamed, the old line torn out of her now like a confession. "We're family, it was always ours." I let the echo of it fade. 200 people watched me lift the microphone one more time. "No," I said gently, the way you correct a frightened patient who's got the facts wrong. "It was Dad's, and then it was mine. You co-signed to help me. That's all you ever did." I saw the words hit her, because she knew about the shoebox. She knew, somewhere, that Dad had written it down. Her mouth opened and nothing came out. And around the hall, I watched faces change, one after another, from shock to something colder. My mother had come to that microphone to expose a liar. She'd succeeded. It just wasn't the liar she'd named. Wade stood up first, unable to look at anyone, his chair scraping loud in the silence. Then Aunt Carol. Then, at the front, Denise slowly lowered her phone, and for the first time all day, she was crying for real. One by one, the people who'd built their comfort on my silence began to rise from their chairs. They left in ones and twos, and I counted them without meaning to, the way I count everything. Wade went first, my uncle, who'd co-signed a loan he couldn't cover and needed my silence to keep his own head above water. His wife, Aunt Carol, followed with her napkin pressed to her mouth. Then 2 cousins who'd taken their own small favors from the family pot over the years and never once asked whose pot it really was. And finally, Denise. My sister set her phone face down on the table, as if she couldn't bear to keep filming, and she walked toward the door with her husband, both of them weeping. Not the performed kind of tears, but the kind that come when a story you've told yourself finally collapses. 6 of them. 6 empty chairs where family had been sitting an hour before. Nobody threw them out. Nobody had to. They left because the room had turned, and because staying meant sitting in the light with the truth on full display. Before Denise reached the door, she stopped near me. Her mascara was ruined and her hands were shaking. "Grace," she said, barely a whisper. "You were the reliable one. You were supposed to just let it go." I looked at my sister, and I felt no triumph, only a tired kind of clarity. "I know," I said. "I was the reliable one. That's exactly how you got away with it for 9 years. She had no answer for that. There wasn't one. She walked out into the spring evening with her husband, and the door of the Grange Hall swung shut behind the last of them. The string lights still glowed. The cake still waited. 200 people, minus 6, sat in a stunned and gentle silence, and I realized my mother had finally gotten her wish. Everyone did know the truth about her daughter now. It just wasn't the truth she'd planned to tell. I set the microphone down on its stand and turned back to my husband. Sam took my hand. That was all. No speech. No victory lap. Pastor Dale, bless him, stepped quietly to the riser and said, in his soft country way, that love had a way of surviving hard truths, and that this was still a wedding, and maybe we ought to remember why we came. And somehow the room breathed again. Someone started the music. Sam and I had our first dance under the string lights, and I put my head on his shoulder and let the whole long fight drain out of me. My mother had gone by then, slipped out a side door without another word. I didn't chase her. The week after the honeymoon, with Sam's help and the statements in hand, I finally closed the joint account for good. What changed was simple. Before the wedding, Rhonda would have fought the closure and dragged it out for weeks. After that night, she had nothing left to protect. When the bank mailed her the notice to close, she didn't contest it, and she didn't ask a single question. She signed her half of the paperwork and sent it back without a word, because the alternative was sitting across a desk from a banker, and from me, explaining why she wouldn't. With both signatures in, the bank closed it in an afternoon. Rhonda's access ended. Denise had to face the salon's real debt without my money underneath it, and Wade had to answer for the loan he'd co-signed, which was always his to answer for. Word got around our small county the way it does. Nobody had to punish my family. The truth did that on its own. As for me, I didn't lose a mother that day. Not exactly. You can't lose what was already being spent. What I lost was the collar, the word reliable, and everything it had been quietly costing me. I kept my husband, my job, my steadiness, and my father's note, which I framed and hung where I'd see it every morning. I still catch babies at 3 in the morning. I still stay calm when the room comes apart. But I don't sign things anymore just to keep the peace. And when someone tells me I'm reliable, I say thank you and I check my own accounts. Being the reliable one was never the problem. Letting people mistake my steadiness for a blank check and my silence for permission was the only mistake I ever really made, and it's the one I'll never make again. I still remember the room going silent, the microphone, Sam's phone, the 6 empty chairs. If someone has ever called you the reliable one while quietly emptying your account, do what I finally did. Look at the numbers, then set the boundary out loud in front of whoever needs to hear it. Your steadiness is not a blank check, and your silence is not consent. Share this story, tell me yours in the comments, and subscribe.